They built a water pipeline straight through my family's ranch without asking, without easement, and without paying a single red cent. And when I asked what gave them the right, Karen, the HOA president, in heels too high for gravel, just smirked and said, "The community voted. Your property was underutilized." Well, that pipeline, it's dry now, and Karen, she's about to find out who really owns the water around here. This all started 6 months ago when I inherited the old Langley Ranch from my Uncle Gene. God rest him. 214 acres of dryland pasture stretching just outside the town limits. It's not much to look at if you're a city council type, but that land has history. My granddad ran cattle there. My cousins learned to ride on that dirt. And underneath it, a little something called the Juniper Creek Aquifer. Now, when I took over the place, I figured I'd live out my retirement fixing fences and growing tomatoes, not battling a petty, power-hungry HOA. But then came Karen. Karen Hollister is the president of the High Ridge Estates Homeowners Association. Picture a woman who drinks Chardonnay at 3 p.m. and calls the cops if your mailbox flag is crooked. She doesn't live anywhere near my ranch, but High Ridge recently expanded their development to the southern slope, which butts right up to the northern edge of my land. One fine Monday morning, I wake up to the sound of heavy equipment, bulldozers, backhoes, trucks. I walk out with my coffee and see a full-blown construction crew digging trenches across my north field. I flagged down the site manager and asked what the hell was going on. He pointed to a clipboard and said, "Installing a water pipeline for the new subdivision." HOA approved. I said, "This is my land. Where's your easement?" He shrugged and said, "Talk to the HOA. We're just contractors." So I did. I went to the next HOA board meeting at their flashy clubhouse. Karen was at the front in her usual blazer and pearls uniform, holding court like she was running for governor. I waited patiently, then politely asked why there was a pipeline going through my pasture. She looked at me like I was asking for free cable. "We put it to a vote," she said, flipping her bangs. "Parcel 116, your ranch was deemed underutilized by the zoning committee. And according to Section 14B of the Community Expansion Act, we're within our rights to lay shared infrastructure across adjacent plots deemed non-residential." I laughed, out loud. I told her she didn't have a single legal document allowing access to my land. No easement, no agreement, nothing. Karen leaned back, crossed her arms, and smiled like a snake in the sun. "You can try to fight it, but we've already laid down 600 feet of pipe. It's operational next month. Might be easier for everyone if you just cooperated." I could feel my blood pressure rising, but I didn't yell, didn't slam the table. Instead, I went home, sat at my kitchen table, opened my file cabinet. You see, what Karen didn't know, what none of them knew, is that back in 2008, I bought a small, forgotten parcel of land 5 miles upstream, a forested hillside with a natural spring on it. At the time, I just liked the view, but that spring, it feeds the very aquifer that supplies water to every home in High Ridge Estates, including that shiny new pipeline, and I still owned it. So while they laid pipe and drafted smug HOA memos, I quietly hired a hydrologist, got my permits in order, and had a control valve installed on the spring head. Legal, spec'd, certified, and 2 days after Karen held her ribbon-cutting ceremony for the community water line, I turned it off. I'll admit turning off that valve felt good. Not spiteful, not petty, just correct. And I slept like a baby that night, knowing that for the first time in weeks, I wasn't the one being pushed around. But the funny thing about people like Karen, they don't back down when they're wrong. No, they double down. The next morning, I had barely poured my second cup of coffee when I heard tires on gravel. A shiny black SUV pulled up to my gate, the kind that looks like it's never seen a dirt road before. Out steps Karen in full HOA battle gear heels, pantsuit, clipboard in hand. She marched right up to my fence like she owned the place and waved at me like I was a Walmart greeter. "Hi there. We noticed an interruption in water flow this morning and tracked it to your property. Just a quick formality, we'll need to inspect your well system and aquifer connection." I took a long sip of coffee, leaned on the post and said, "You mean my spring, my aquifer, on my land, that one?" She blinked. "Didn't like that? Well, since the community relies on it, we consider it shared infrastructure under subdivision clause." I cut her off. "That clause applies to common property. My land isn't in your subdivision, Karen, and I've got the deeds permits and water rights to prove it." She tried to keep smiling, but it cracked a little around the edges. Then she tried a different tactic, condescension. Look, I know legalese can get confusing for, ranch folks. But this is just how HOAs work. It's really in everyone's best interest. I couldn't help but laugh. Karen, I used to draft water rights claims for the state of Colorado. I've forgotten more legalese than you'll read in your entire HOA handbook. Her jaw actually dropped for half a second before she recomposed herself. Well, then you'll know this is far from over. And she stomped back to her SUV like a lady in a soap opera who just realized she married the wrong man. By that afternoon, I was getting calls from neighbors I didn't even know I had. Hey man, you got any idea why our water pressure's gone? Are you on a well? You know anything about a valve? My wife says the HOA's blaming you. Blaming me. Of course they were. Karen sent out a community-wide email titled Urgent Interruption of Water Supply due to private action, accusing me of tampering with municipal infrastructure and warning that legal steps were being explored. That email made it sound like I was some outlaw in a cowboy movie, twirling my mustache while twiddling the town's water shut. What she didn't mention, the HOA never had permission to tap into the source to begin with. They skipped permits, skipped easement negotiations, skipped literally everything except drawing a dotted line on a map and calling it theirs. So I did what any reasonable man would do. I walked into the county recorder's office with a binder of documents, maps, and hydrological reports. And I sat down with Marcia, the clerk, who's been there for 30 years and remembers when Karen used to sell Avon. I explained everything from the pipeline to the illegal access to the water diversion. Marcia gave me that tight-lipped smile like she was trying not to burst into laughter. I've got half the HOA calling in complaints, she said. But funny thing is, not one of them has filed a single permit. You've got water rights, upstream access, and control valves. You're clean. Then she leaned in and whispered Karen's playing HOA politics in a town that still believes in land deeds. By day 3, the subdivision was bone dry. Garden hoses were limp, sprinklers dead, toilets flushed only once. The community pool closed indefinitely. Karen held another emergency HOA meeting, and oh, you better believe I went. She started with theatrics, talking like a politician during a hurricane. This disruption was unforeseen and stems from a private landowner acting outside the spirit of cooperation. People were furious. The retirees in golf shirts, they were red in the face, the single moms with toddlers. Not buying it. Even old Mr. Hankerson, who normally sided with the HOA on everything, stood up and asked, why the hell didn't we get a permit before laying pipe on someone else's ranch? Karen dodged and deflected. She said they had verbal assurance, which is not and never will be legally binding. I raised my hand, and when she tried to skip me on the speaker list, the crowd actually booed. So I took the mic, walked up front, and held up the deeds. Here's the problem, I said. You laid infrastructure across private property without permission. You diverted water without rights. And now you want to paint me as the villain. I've done everything by the book. You haven't even read the book. Dead silence. You want water. Get your own source. Or come to the table like adults and negotiate a supply contract. But the days of bullying ranchers are over. Someone in the back yelled, "Preach." Another clapped, then another. Karen sat down, didn't say a word. But that's not where it ended. Oh no, the HOA's next move. They tried to sue me, claimed I was withholding water essential to community operations. Tried to argue that I had a moral obligation to open the valve since I knew they needed it. That case lasted one hearing. The judge retired. Marine owns land himself. Read the file, looked at Karen and said, you built a pipeline through someone's land with no easement, no permit, and now you're upset he controls the source. Case dismissed. And then he turned to me and said, you want reimbursement for damages, Mr. Langley? I said no, just peace, he smiled. You're a better man than me. I thought after the lawsuit flopped harder than a vegan steak at a Texas BBQ, Karen would finally throw in the towel. She didn't. Nope. Instead, she declared war. Not the kind with weapons, but the HOA kind. The passive-aggressive rule-twisting, fine-slapping, newsletter-blasting kind. And let me tell you, Karen wields a clipboard like most folks wield a shotgun. It started with letters, lots of them. Every morning for a week straight, I found bright yellow HOA notices stuffed in my mailbox, even though I don't live in the HOA. Violation number 117, Unapproved fencing material, visible from community road. Violation number 203, livestock, creating odor offensive to adjacent homeowners. Violation number 388, standing water poses a mosquito risk to shared airspace. Shared airspace. What is this, the Pentagon? I ignored them at first thinking it was a tantrum, but then came the code enforcement officer. Some poor guy sent out from the city with a clipboard and a confused look. Sir, we received multiple complaints about zoning infractions. Says here something about unauthorized water control mechanisms. I showed him the permit, the water rights, and the judge's ruling. He whistled low and said, "Yup, looks like you're solid. Sorry to bother you. Honestly, we've been getting flooded with calls from that HOA. Half of it's nonsense." He left shaking his head. Karen was abusing every bureaucratic channel she could find, trying to bury me in red tape. And when that didn't work, she went personal. One evening, I drove into town and noticed something new pinned to the bulletin board outside the post office. "Is your water safe?" A flyer with a photo of my ranch and the caption, "Local water source controlled by private citizen with unknown qualifications. Community safety at risk." She actually tried to smear me. But here's the kicker. She included her phone number at the bottom, tried to spin it like a concerned community member seeking transparency. Problem is, people around here know me, and they sure as hell know her. Old-timers started coming up to me at the diner saying Langley, that HOA woman's off her rocker. Even Reverend Matthews said if Jesus had to deal with HOAs, we'd still be waiting on the Sermon on the Mount. But then Karen made a critical mistake. In her desperation to regain control of the water, she called an emergency vote among HOA board members to approve a new pipeline extension, one that would bypass my ranch entirely by cutting across another neighbor's land, a smaller parcel owned by a sweet widow named Doris Miller. Now, Doris doesn't do email, she doesn't drive, and she sure doesn't speak legalese. So Karen took advantage, told her the HOA needed temporary access to lay some minor utility line, had her sign a waiver written in 6-point font that granted permanent easement. I found out when I saw surveyor flags lining Doris's property. I drove over and asked her what was going on, and she said, "Oh, just some pipes." Karen said it was standard. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just about me anymore. Karen was willing to lie to and exploit a 74-year-old widow just to get around my land. That night, I made a phone call to my cousin in the county planning department. Turns out the new pipeline route had been rushed through with a fast-track permit, rubber-stamped thanks to a friendly HOA board member with connections. I filed a complaint immediately. So did Doris once I explained what she'd really signed. And it turns out signing a legal waiver without full disclosure to a senior citizen is a very serious matter. The county launched an investigation. Karen, of course, tried to spin it. It's a misunderstanding. We were just trying to secure water for families. But now she was in hot water of a different kind. Because while all this was happening, I had also contacted a local journalist, a guy who does Sunday feature pieces on local scandals. I handed him everything: maps, emails, the HOA's failed pipeline, the lawsuit, Doris's story, the smear flyers, my permits, and documents. He ran the piece under the headline, "The HOA That Tried to Steal a Spring." It went viral. Well, viral for a small town, shared over 7,000 times, picked up by a regional affiliate. The comments section was a digital pitchfork mob. And Karen? She started getting real quiet, but she still had one more card to play. She called for a full HOA community vote to determine whether or not they should move forward with alternative legal action against me and any other non-compliant entities, read Doris, and anyone who disagreed with her. The meeting was packed. People brought lawn chairs. Someone grilled hot dogs. Karen walked up to the mic and gave this overdramatic speech about protecting the integrity of High Ridge estates and facing down obstructionists. Then came the vote. One by one, residents raised their hands, and by the end, she lost, 83-4. Even her own vice president voted against her. The board removed Karen as president that very night. The new president, some level-headed veteran named Bill Rawlings, immediately froze all HOA expansion projects. A week later, I got a handwritten letter in the mail from Bill. "Mr. Langley, on behalf of High Ridge Estates, I apologize for everything you've endured. If you're open to it, I'd love to sit down and discuss fair terms for future water use. Respectfully, Bill." Now that's how adults handle problems. Karen, she's gone quiet. Word is she moved to Florida to be closer to family. But rumor has it she's already arguing with the HOA down there. And Doris, well, she started a garden with her granddaughter using water from the very same spring Karen tried to hijack. I helped her install a spigot. We laugh about it now. But let me tell you something. When someone builds a pipeline across your land without asking and then tries to crush you with bureaucracy and then lies to your neighbors to steal their land too, you don't just shut off the water, you expose them, you outlast them, and you let their own arrogance drown them. I thought it was over. The pipeline was dry, the lawsuit was dead, Karen was voted out. I was finally back to tending tomatoes, minding my cows, and enjoying my coffee while the sun rose over my now peaceful ranch. But then, the van showed up. Big white Sprinter van with a logo on the side, Real Voices, America's Changing Neighborhoods. Out jumps a guy with a windbreaker and big city hair, holding a mic. Behind him, a woman with a camera the size of a small dog and sunglasses indoors. They come marching up my gravel drive like they were filming 60 Minutes. I step outside, wiping my hands on a rag, and before I can ask a thing, the man smiles wide like a toothpaste ad and says, "Hi there. We're doing a human interest piece on rural water disputes. We'd love to get your side of the story, I looked past him, and sure enough, there she was. Karen, sitting in the front seat of the van, sipping from one of those obnoxious metal tumblers with a glittery sticker that probably said HOA Queen. She waved like we were old friends. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't journalism, this was PR. The documentary crew was her last-ditch effort, a reputation salvage mission. Try to make herself look like the victim. Paint me as the grumpy, backward rancher who selfishly cut off water to hardworking families. And maybe, just maybe, she could use the footage to strong-arm her way into some HOA sympathy votes elsewhere. What Karen didn't realize is I was more than ready. I invited them in, made coffee, laid out cookies, let them set up their camera in my barn, where I keep a wall covered in maps, deeds, and water reports like a polite conspiracy theorist. They started soft. "So, you own the land and the water source. That must give you a lot of power," I smiled. "Only if folks try to take it without asking." The interviewer leaned forward. "Some say you turned off the supply out of spite, that you had other options." I nodded, calm as a sunrise. Sure, I had options. I could have sued, could have gone to the press, could have demanded payment, but I didn't. I just stopped giving away something I own. That's not spite, that's boundaries. Then I reached behind me and pulled out a file folder 2 inches thick, dropped it on the table. "These are the permits your subject forgot to mention. This I tapped a map is the illegal pipeline route. This I held up an email is where she threatened legal action for me not donating my water." Their smiles cracked. Then I showed them the flyer Karen made, the one questioning my qualifications to manage a water source. "I'm a licensed hydrological engineer. Spent 15 years working for the State Water Board." Karen. She once fined a man $300 for leaving his trash can out past noon. The camera woman snorted. Couldn't help herself. When I was done, I looked square at the camera and said, "You want a story about changing neighborhoods? Here it is. A homeowners association tried to run roughshod over an old rancher. Only problem was, the old rancher read the fine print. They wrapped early. Karen never got her on-camera moment. She left before the sun even hit noon. Didn't say goodbye. 2 weeks later, the segment aired. 10 minutes long, I was the main voice. The piece painted HOA abuse for what it was. Showed real documents. Featured an interview with Doris. Even got a soundbite from the judge who threw out Karen's case. The final frame, a shot of my spring. Crystal clear water trickling down the rocks with my cattle grazing in the background. Sometimes the person they try to steamroll is the one holding the valve. After that, things changed. The state HOA Oversight Board launched a quiet ethics investigation. Word got around that Karen had fudged voting procedures, forged consent forms, and spent HOA funds on PR projects without board approval. The new HOA president, Bill, he showed up at my ranch with a handshake and a reasonable offer. "We want to build a fair contract for water access, transparent terms. You set the price. I agreed under one condition: Doris gets free water for life." Deal signed, pipeline rerouted legally this time, community water restored, no drama, no yelling, just paperwork handshakes, and one very big lesson. As for Karen, the last I heard she was trying to get on a new HOA board in Florida. But when her name popped up in a background search, they passed her over. Apparently, a certain viral documentary clip made the rounds among the board, especially the part where she smirks and says, "The community voted. His land was underutilized." Yeah, that didn't age well. Now the ranch is quiet. The pipeline's buried with permission this time. The tomatoes are coming in nice. Doris stops by with her granddaughter to fill up watering cans. Sometimes I sit by the spring and just listen. It's not the sound of water, it's the sound of peace. Because here's the thing, you don't need to yell to get justice. Sometimes all you need is patience, paperwork, and the power to turn off the tap. It's funny what happens when the noise dies down. No more flyers, no more bulldozers, no more HOA drama clogging up my mailbox. Just morning sun cattle grazing slow, and the gentle sound of that spring flowing like it always has, quiet, steady, and unstoppable. Karen was gone. The HOA board was cleaned out and rebuilt with folks who actually knew how to read a budget and treat people like neighbors, not suspects. And me, I finally had what I wanted from the start: respect. Bill, the new HOA president, turned out to be a man of his word. He and I sat down at my kitchen table over coffee, no lawyers, no press, just two men trying to fix what the last leadership broke. We came to terms the HOA could legally tap into the spring through a designated route. They'd install their own flow regulator under my supervision. They'd pay a monthly water access fee based on market rates. A portion of that fee would go to maintaining the ecosystem around the spring, keeping it clean and safe. In short, no more taking without asking. The cherry on top, we got Doris Miller's land rights restored. Her easement was reversed. Bill himself hand-delivered her a written apology. She read it, squinted at him, and said, "Next time someone wants to dig a ditch through my garden, they can bring cookies first." I could have sued, could have dragged Karen's name through every court in the county, but I didn't, because after everything, what I really wanted wasn't revenge. It was peace, boundaries, justice, not punishment. And that's exactly what I got. The spring still runs, same as it did when my granddad watered his herd here. Only now it's protected, valued, and understood for what it really is, the heart of this land. Neighbors stop by more often now, not because they want something, but because they appreciate what we stood for, what we protected. A couple folks asked me to speak at the local Grange meeting, talk about land rights and HOAs. I never thought I'd be the guy with a lecture to give, but I'll tell you this. A room full of ranchers and retirees listened real close when I said, if someone wants to walk over your land, make sure they knock first. And if they don't, make sure you've got the paperwork to remind them whose name is on the deed. Sometimes the younger folks ask me if I regret not fighting harder, not going full scorched earth on Karen. I just smile, because in the end, she lost her power. She lost her community. She lost her narrative. And I never raised my voice once. What more do you need? These days, things are simpler. Doris brings by zucchini the size of baseball bats. The HOA pays on time, no excuses. And every year I take a walk up to that valve and give it a little check just to remind myself. One twist of the wrist and the whole system changes. But I don't need to turn it anymore. I built a little bench by the spring. Nothing fancy. Just a few planks and some old fence posts. From there you can see the whole valley, the ranch, the new pipeline, legal safe, and the town beyond. Sometimes I sit there and think about Uncle Gene, about how proud he'd be that we kept the land intact, and about how funny it is that a woman with a clipboard and a power complex thought she could outmaneuver 3 generations of ranchers by pushing a pipe through the wrong pasture. Karen, Mom. Last I heard she tried to join an HOA advisory board in Palm Beach. Didn't make it past the background check. Apparently one of the board members had seen the documentary. Oops. Let's be real for a second. Most of us just want peace and quiet, a lawn we can mow on Saturdays, a neighbor who waves instead of files a complaint, maybe a potluck every now and then. But then there's that kind of HOA, you know the one, where the board meetings feel like Cold War negotiations, where someone's always measuring your grass with a ruler or writing angry letters about the color of your garage door. And in those HOAs, folks like Karen rise to the top, not because they're qualified, but because they care just enough to be dangerous. They don't see neighbors. They see rules to enforce, power to wield, and in the case of my story, pipes to steal, DD. So here's the takeaway. Don't let the paperwork fool you. Just because someone waves a rule book doesn't mean they're right. Learn your rights, know your boundaries, Literally, keep good records. Deeds, permits, water rights, photos, emails. You never know when a friendly conversation will turn into courtroom theater. Stand firm but smart. It's tempting to lash out when someone pushes you, but a well-timed legal document will do more damage than 1,000 angry words. Trust me, bullies don't always wear leather jackets. Sometimes they wear heels, carry clipboards, and have HOA titles, but the playbook's the same: intimidate, isolate, and control. And just like on the playground, the best way to handle a bully, don't punch, just pull the plug. To every HOA board member out there reading this, the decent ones, I'll say this: run your communities with transparency, not tyranny, with service, not status. And if you ever find yourself trying to secretly run a pipeline through a rancher's land without asking, maybe just don't. Now it's your turn. Have you dealt with a nightmare HOA? Did a Karen ever try to pull something shady in your neighborhood? Drop your story in the comments below. I read every one. I know I'm not the only one who's had to fight back with facts and a little bit of strategy. And hey, if you think more folks should hear how this story turned out, hit the like button, share it with your neighbors, and don't forget to subscribe if you want more real stories where justice gets the last word.